Well, this is Basis 95 Part 2, the documents to back up Laura Loudon's story. Laura, it's over to you.
Yeah, I was here speaking to you yesterday, Miles, and basically I brought some documentation to back up my story.
So the first thing we got to ascertain is you told us that you shouldn't have got pregnant after your first child.
That's correct.
What's the technical reason for all that, and why is it a surprise you had more children in the first place?
Well, when I was 23, I had my son, who is now 20, and for years after I gave birth to him, I couldn't fall pregnant, so I went for a endoscopy. Is that right?
And endoscopy. Yeah, you're probably saying as well as I can.
They did fertility diagnosis to see what the problem was, and they said that they diagnosed me with secondary infertility syndrome, which is when you can fall pregnant with one child but you can't after that. And it wasn't until 14 years passed, and I just presumed, they said there was chances of less than 1% that I would ever fall pregnant. So I had basically given up on the fact that I was going to have more kids, but lo and behold, on my 38th birthday, I went to the doctors, and I'd already been there a good couple of times with really sore stomach, and basically didn't feel well at all. And I think it was the third time I was there, she tested me for pregnancy and said that she was very surprised to find that I was pregnant. And I was already 13 weeks and 6 days gone. So I was sent up for a scan, and Alicia was subsequently born the following April.
And was that a normal term? Nothing, no surprises? It all went normal?
Well, it was a very horrendous birth, because they found that my organs had glued together from my first caesarean section, so it was an emergency caesarean. And I was extremely ill. I was in hospital for 3 weeks. I had to get a blood transfusion, and I had a hematoma inside me, 17 centimetres long by 3 centimetres.
What exactly is that for the layman?
It's basically a huge blood clot inside you. And because they didn't know it was there, after a caesarean section, they give you anti-clotting agents. So there was a blood clot inside me that was attempting to clot, except when every time they were giving me these anti-clotting agents, because you're in bed after the caesarean section, it wasn't able to improve, and they didn't find out for about 10 days that I actually had that.
What does that actually mean? Does it give pain and all that?
What's all the tremendously sore. I couldn't move. I was white as a sheet. I'd lost so much blood in the operation itself, and they didn't know what was wrong, like I say, and eventually sent me for a scan and realised that I had a hematoma.
And how was that removed, or did it drained away, or what?
Well, they stopped giving me the anti-clotting jags, and basically within about a week and a half, I was well enough to leave the hospital.
And what happened with the second pregnancy then, or the third pregnancy rather?
Yeah, the third pregnancy was a surprise, because Alicia was 5 months old, and I decided I didn't want any more children, so I had an implant, one of the implants you get that stops you having falling pregnant, inserted into my arm. But I was going on holiday the next day, and when I got to where I was going, which was Turkey, I took off the bandage, and the implant had actually worked its way right out my arm, and it's like a bit of a biro pen, the middle of a biro pen, and so I had no choice but to pull it out. And when I came back from holiday to get the implant reinserted, I put it off for a couple of days because I'd just got back from holiday, and when I went back to get it reinserted, they discovered that I was pregnant, and Alicia was only 5 months old. So that was me pregnant with Sophia, and I was 39 years old and 11 months before. It was 1 month before my 40th birthday that I had Sophia. So within 15 months, I had 2 girls from the age of 39 to 40. 38 to 40, sorry.
So any anything unusual to show that there was any kind of difference thing apart from all this trauma? I mean, it's obviously distressing, but I mean, you got two beautiful girls.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I did have, but yeah, I do have. However, my girls are significantly different, and I just want to know why, and I want to get this out there so that people are aware that this sort of thing's going on, whatever it may
What do
be.
you mean by significantly different from before or after? This is the crux of it. Did you different fathers or what? Or I mean,
yes, sorry. Alicia is her father is a guy that I was seeing from Ireland, a boyfriend I had from Ireland for about 6 months, and Alicia's dad is him, and Sophia's father is the one who died just last November. So they do have different fathers.
you mentioned something happened with the Irish father. What happened to him?
Well, that's a good question. I wanted a DNA test to see if he was the father or not, basically for child support because he was working at the time and I was quite hard up. And I wanted to deter who Alicia's father was anyway. If I wasn't sure if it was the father of the littlest girl, because he was also my partner around about that time. However, it had been just for one weekend, I think I'd slept with him. But to deter if who the father was, I'd ordered a DNA test off of a famous chemist site. And it arrived and I asked him if he wanted to do it. And quite soon after that, he disappeared back to where he stayed in Ireland. And I haven't seen him since.
So and there's no legal recourse. Does he not want to know that what's happened to his daughter?
I did try to contact him about it, but every time I try to contact him about it, he just blocks me. So I don't think he's very paternal.
I mean, he's not. I mean, would he want to know about what's happening now?
I really want to tell him, but as I say, he's impossible to get a hold of and to get in touch with. I have tried through Facebook, but he doesn't answer the messages, and before I've even got a chance to check, he blocks me. So I have attempted to let him know what's going on.
Well, we've never heard the story of a father doing a runner before in these circumstances.
Sorry, say that again.
Sorry, no, I'm just being a bit pragmatic about fathers running,
yeah,
like that.
Well, yeah, of course, it could be just probably, It's unlikely though because he's got 2 kids to somebody else down south, and he sees them regularly, and he's actually quite an active father. He plays an active fatherly role in their lives, so it was quite a surprise to me that he just didn't want to know. It just seemed a bit odd. It could be that he's not interested because he knows that maybe it'll cost him child support or whatever, I don't know. However, I couldn't tell you, I don't know.
Okay, well, we've established that really you shouldn't have got pregnant. You've got pregnant on, I think, you've become pregnant on, would the term unusual be acceptable?
Well, yeah, it was more than unusual because the doctor told me after 14 years there would be a less than 1% chance that I'd fall pregnant after trying for so long, especially given that I had secondary infertility. And that's what I was diagnosed with.
So now, having got this wonderful situation, for those who haven't seen part 1, could you sort of essentially recap from part 1 and also start introducing these documents that you have available whenever you wish?
Yeah, I mean, to basically summarise the situation, the reason I'm here is because my children, my 2 beautiful daughters, were 2 and 3 years old, and they were taken into social work care by the state in Edinburgh, and they were placed in foster care. And when they were in foster care from October 2016 until December 2016 with one certain carer. And then I was told that the girls would have to be moved to another carer because the carer that they were with wasn't coping with them. But this was news to me. However, I was told that they were going to be moved 4 days before Christmas 2016, However, they didn't. I've since actually read reports and in the reports, and I've asked the carer that they were subsequently moved to, and they didn't arrive at that next carer's until 3 days before Christmas. They were supposed to arrive on the 21st of December. They didn't arrive until the 22nd of December. So there's 24 hours essentially missing out their care plan. When I next saw the children, I noticed immediately that they were very different. When I say different, I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I took lots of photographs of them at the time, and they just seemed very pale in colour and energyless and flat. And it wasn't until later on when I was in the house and I was looking at these photographs that I noticed that their eye colour had changed from blue to brown in one of my children, my youngest child, and with the other child from a greeny blue colour to a very sort of hazel colour. And also my oldest child used to have very bad tongue tie. So when she stuck her tongue out her mouth, she could hardly get out at all. It's something to do with the piece of skin that holds your tongue into your mouth underneath. And they said that they didn't want to operate on her because she could eat and speak properly. So there was no need to. However, they said it was quite a bad case of tongue tie, but since she could cope with eating and speaking with it, they didn't operate. However, that tongue tie, since the move from the first foster carer to the second foster carer, amidst the 24-hour that is missing out their care plan, has subsequently disappeared. So Alicia doesn't any longer have tongue tie. And there's no explanation for that.
Well, you've got some of the documents there, which actually
do.
gives. Now we've blanked out the names of the children, but you've actually named them verbally. So,
Yeah, sorry about that.
well, we'll just continue with A and S. I think it
A
is.
and S, right? Okay, no problem. Yeah, so the first document that I brought is basically the first page of the document I brought basically just goes over the fact that the doctor's got a referral for both my daughters and was delighted to meet them. And the carer that they're with is the appointed social worker today, and child A, at that point was 4 years and 5 months old. He goes on to say there'd been a great deal of email discussion between health and social work in terms of trying to organise this appointment. I had to push for this appointment for some time. They weren't willing to let them see a doctor. When I say they weren't willing, I had to go to one of the top members of the social work in Edinburgh and say, I need my children looked at because their eye colour's changed. I'm worried about their health in case they've got an underlying health concern. I'm a concerned mother and I want to know why their eye colour has changed and I want to know why they look different. So eventually this appointment was given to us through NHS Lothian. So that's what that reads, yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to the next one.
Okay. Yeah, it goes on to say this is his the consultant rather than the doctor. He explained at the beginning of today's appointment, at the time, he said to me it would be extremely uncommon for a medical condition to exist that would cause my daughters to have an eye colour change without having any other systematic symptoms noticed. And they didn't have any ill health at all, except child A had a tongue tie, which wasn't a huge health concern, and also she had an allergy to penicillin. He goes on to say, we have had some discussion how lighting can sometimes have an effect on the colour of an individual's eyes, or what clothing they may be wearing and so forth. Having said that, I made it clear that I wanted to ensure there was no evidence of ill health, and I understood that Ms. Loudon was happy for me to take her concerns seriously. So yeah, he goes on to say that child A and her younger sister were initially placed on the Child Protection Register September 2016, and that was amidst sexual abuse allegations, and were subsequently deregistered when they were placed on compulsory supervision order away from home.
Could you just refer back to those sexual abuse allegations?
Yeah.
That were mentioned in part one.
Yes, Alicia had said to me that her daddy had given her snuffles, and I faced him with this. My youngest daughter as well was behaving really strangely, trying to sit on when we were watching television, she was always trying to get her bottom near me and near my headspace, and her sister said to me, that's because she wants you to kiss her bum like daddy does. And as horrific as it sounds, I don't really like talking about it, but I know it's essential to this.
But is
So
that why you ended up losing the children? Because you confronted him with this, and there
I
was a
did.
big fight, and whatever happened, he had a black eye.
Yeah, I did. I had a fight with him. I went up to ask him about the allegations, and basically just to speak to him about it. But he was very dismissive. He didn't want to speak to me. So I lost my temper and I hit him, and I got charged with minor assault. The police never interviewed him about the allegations that my daughter had said, which made me feel very let down by the system, because obviously a child of that age wouldn't make something like that up. I don't think children actually know how to lie until about the age of 3, because I've looked it up, and I just wanted it looked into, but they weren't willing to, the police or the social work. So I'm not sure if that was the reason they were taken off me, because at the time the allegations were made about their father. Well, certainly Sophia's father, but Alicia also called him dad. Sorry, child A called him dad. And I'm not sure if that was some sort of a catalyst in all of this. But the social work were perfectly aware the children were safe with me, and it all did kind of kick off from that point, to be honest, to do with the sexual abuse allegations. And then they came out with all these things about how I'd moved around too much, even though it was the council that were moving me. And I'd had bed bugs at one of my properties. They said that that hadn't happened, that had just been something I'd made up, even though I've got the rent-a-kill sheets telling me that I had bed bugs, and £800 was paid to them for 3 treatments of bed bugs. So I can't see that they would come out with something like that unless they knew exactly the type of pest that we were dealing with. However, will I go on with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it basically says that they had been accommodated, my children, in October 2016. They were moved to their present carers on the 22nd of December, although I may add, again, they were meant to arrive on the 21st. My oldest daughter's mother had supervised contact at the Fort Early Years Centre just a few days after my daughter's transfer to their new carer. The girls were described as pale and a little washed out. The present foster carer agreed this was the case. Their mother, as in me, felt there was something different about the girls, but it was only in retrospect that she realised the colour of her daughter's eyes appeared to be very different to how they had previously been. She was concerned about this change in their eye colour and looked this up online to discover it would be sensible for her daughters to have a medical assessment to ensure there was nothing untoward.
So what actually happened there? I mean, there's a sign of concern, a lot of sign of concern here, but what do you feel the official feeling on this is? Were they taken by surprise?
They said they'd never heard of it before. They said they had never heard of this happening, and only in certain medical conditions, i.e. to do with your liver, which would mean things like hepatitis, jaundice, things like that, that would influence the colour of your eyes if they were to change colour. However, with the girls not having any health concerns as such, the consultant was perplexed. He said he'd never heard of it. So he wanted to look over the girls to make sure that they were healthy. That's what he told me.
Now, you're pretty smart. You've been doing a lot of looking up and checking up on things. What else do you feel has happened here?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think they're the same. I know how this sounds, but I've looked over this extensively and I wish I did have answers for it. However, from the research that I've done, and that I've conducted over the internet, the unfortunate conclusion that I've had to draw from this, well, I've not had to, but the conclusion I've drawn from it is that the children aren't the same, because I think the children have been cloned. And I think human cloning is involved here. And I think that there's a child trafficking ring involved here.
Okay, that's really serious stuff.
I know.
What on earth makes you think they've been cloned? We also talked about soul swapping and things like that.
It could
What
be.
exactly have you in your research?
What have I learned? Well, what I learned, one of the reasons I've drawn to this conclusion is because one of the things with cloning that they can't deter when they clone a human being is eye colour and ear shape. That's the only two things that they can't actually deter fully. And that's the things in my children that have changed. And if one of my children had changed, eye colour or ear shape, I might have actually been able to live with it. Well, probably not, but it would have been a lot easier. But for both of them, simultaneously, to have...
Yeah, I mean, this is very important. This is one thing having it once, but to have it at the same time with both children.
Exactly. It's very, very unnerving. It's a scary situation to be in. And, you know, I do feel like I'm putting myself at risk in a way by telling this story, because there's so many people in Edinburgh that I've spoken to who I trust and I've known for years and years and years, who've told me that I'm supposed to be keeping my mouth shut about this type of thing. And they're scared too.
So exactly what... I mean, we're dealing with the care home, we're dealing with a certain school.
Yeah.
The green crocodile things.
Yeah. Primarily...
the northeastern part of Edinburgh.
Yes, the northern eastern part of Edinburgh, yeah.
And exactly what is that? What does that mean? What's the location?
Yeah, it covers an area called Leith in Edinburgh, and Leith used to be a separate town from Edinburgh, but it's now amalgamated, so it's now part of Edinburgh. But it's the part of Edinburgh that's near the docks. So it used to be quite a lot of import and export with merchant stuff, and it's pretty much just a couple of fishing boats now. But that's the area we're talking about in Edinburgh.
And are you talking about particular schools or care homes without, causing any discomfort to those individuals? But I mean, where did this crocodile thing come from? The crocodile, the green crocodile dinosaurs?
It's the nursery that my children were attending at the time when all of this happened. And I know that there's other individuals going through this who don't want to be named, because they're scared.
This is the nursery where your children were at. These green crocodile things turned up.
That's correct, yeah.
Well, let's get more into this detail. I mean, how many? What's involved? What's going on here?
Well, that's the $1 million question, Miles, because nobody really seems to know what's going on, except that this particular nursery has had issues with, and it's in the papers. You can look it up. They've had issues with.
Can you name the sort of headlines that people could look up online?
Yeah, and they can look up
in archives.
Woman starves to death in banana flats in Edinburgh. There was a woman who had a little boy at this nursery, and this is last year, and she was found to be in her house after he was removed from her care, I may add. She was a PhD chemistry student, and her little boy was removed by social work, same nursery as my children were at, and she was found dead in her house, and seemingly she'd been there for months. And the authorities said that they would look into it further, but I've heard nothing about it. I think was it last October that? I think so, when we were reading about it the other day. But she had seemingly starved to death in her house. And I just think that's odd in this day and age. There's also another headline people can look up. They can look up mother found dead in house at Fort, and she was found dead. This was 2006 or 7, I think. Could be wrong, but it's around about that time. And there was a little boy who was attending the same nursery as the one that we're referring to, who was attending the nursery, and eventually when the authorities got to him, he had actually been in a house opposite the nursery and had covered his dead mother. His mother had died, and he'd managed to feed himself off of stuff that was in the cupboard for 3 weeks or so. And they can look that up as well. And this that's another highlight to this nursery, if you like. So it is quite renowned in Edinburgh that this nursery it hasn't had the best publicity, let's put it that way.
But what makes that strange? I mean, what about these crocodile things? And what about an area where some people not too far from there claim to be some kind of military base or something?
Yes, I have heard stories about this. I don't know exactly where it is, but I have heard people saying that there's some type of military base in northeast Edinburgh. Nobody seems to know where it is. However,
I mean, it is a coast, it is a strategic capital city, and having military bases there is quite a logical thing, but why is it so mysterious?
well, it's so mysterious because nobody knows where it is and nobody's got a clue. I mean, you get military bases, but normally they would be identified whether it was on Google Maps or through...
Well, civilian workers work there, people have to have deliveries. I mean, all this sort of thing has to go on.
Exactly. So nobody knows where this is, and I'm talking about people who were born and bred in this area for that are 50 years old now. They've heard of it, but they don't know where it is.
And what's the name? What have they heard of?
They've heard that there's some type of military base in northeast Edinburgh.
By a name, any name?
No, I can't. Honestly, nobody knows anything about it. It's extremely mysterious. It could just be a rumour, don't get me wrong. However, it seems to be quite a rife rumour. I don't know, I think you were saying something that you might have heard something about as well.
Well, that's my observation from somebody who did a lot of research in that region, but I can't say it's in the same region. Was there any UFO activity in that area in the past?
Not that I know of, but there's just about 20 miles up the road, there's been what's the area called?
Livingston, is it? No.
Well, Livingston, yeah, primarily.
The famous case, a forestry worker met these spheres with things coming out of them.
Yes, that's the guy that I think he was a forestry worker, and he went home and he had his trousers ripped, and he had been a really outstanding member of the community, didn't have any mental health problems, etc. And he had phoned the police and the doctor because he had a bang on his head, and seemingly he was walking through a forest in Deadridge, is it? When he saw sphere type things hovering above the ground, which seemed to be quite interested in him, and he actually had rips in his trousers, but he can't remember much else other than that, I don't think, from the incident.
Okay, well, let's get back to the documents you've had here, and let's go through the details just as we have them available.
Yeah, okay.
And then we'll also go on to the very few photographs which have got the children on them, because we don't want to have their faces in sight and all.
No, for safety reasons. But as I was saying, I can't remember where I was, but I'll go to this bit. So I had supervised contact just a few days after being transferred to the second carers. The girls were described as pale and a little washed out, and their present foster carer agreed that this was the case. I felt there was something different about the girls, but it was only in retrospect that I realised the colour of my daughter's eyes appeared to be very different to how they'd previously been. I was concerned about this and obviously wanted a medical assessment. Sorry, I think I've said that already, haven't I? So the next part just says that I had brought in a couple of photographs with me to demonstrate why I was concerned about the colour changed. But when I expressed I was unable to detect a significant difference in the colour of the girl's eyes within the photographs compared to that day, Ms. Loudon told me the photographs were not particularly good at demonstrating her concern. Well, that's true actually, because I was in the middle of a move. I'd been placed in temporary accommodation and a lot of my photographs went missing. So the only photographs that I had with me were pretty good actually at demonstrating what I was talking about. However, the consultant didn't really agree with me, and I didn't want to argue with him, so I kind of just said, I agree with you, okay, let's move on. The next bit is, this is the part about child A's tongue tie. Just goes on to say that child A has no serious ill health or operations. Her mother pointed out that child A had had a previous tongue tie, and it was a severe tongue tie, and reference was made to the gap between her front teeth. She also now has like a bit of skin that carries, that she didn't used to have before, above her front two teeth. And I think the medical term is diastema. So I pointed that out to him as well. He didn't really seem concerned with that, obviously. She'd been seen by a local dentist. Her teeth said were in very good condition, and she'd had her teeth coated in order to protect them from decay. However, he found no evidence of the tongue tie. The tongue tie has disappeared from my eldest daughter. So I don't know what on earth has happened there. But she's no longer got it. And for a tongue tie to disappear, as suggested previously to me, if she had, when she was a little baby, they said if she has trouble feeding or if she has trouble eating, we'll operate on it and we will snip under her tongue. But because she didn't need that done, she didn't have the operation. However, the tongue tie has hence disappeared. The next part just goes on to say that concerns raised by myself about what I perceived as a dramatic change in both of my daughter's colour of eyes. There had been some email discussion prior to today's appointment between health and social work in order to clarify how best to proceed. Unfortunately, there was a lack of availability to see a doctor for the girls to see sooner. And that was after, I think it took about 4 months for me to even get this appointment arranged. And then more waiting time until it came up. And then he just goes on to say, but I recommended that they had, in fact, that's not relevant. So yeah, then we've got the background to the referral. It just says that the mother of the children had brought to her previous social worker's attention, who was my first social worker, that she was concerned about the dramatic change in eye colour of both her daughters following their transfer from one foster carer to their present carer. The girls had moved to their present foster care placement on 22nd of December. Again, they should have arrived there on the 21st, but because they left the previous carer on the 21st, so where were they until the 22nd? That's what perplexes me. Just a few days after that, Miss Loudon met with her daughters. It was the first time I'd seen them since they'd been moved, at the Fort Early Years Centre as part of my supervised contact with them. She told me that she immediately felt there was something different about them. The foster carer today confirmed the girls were relatively pale and looked a little tired, and it may have been their pallor and made their eye colour all the more striking for Miss Loudon. She acknowledged eye colour can be seen as different. And I think actually this is similar to the first one that was mentioned about Alicia, because child A, because there's 2 different reports, one for child A and one for child S. So then again, he just goes on to say that I was clear in my own mind that there was something very different now. As I've said to you yesterday, Miles, a mother knows her children, and this is certainly something I didn't want to happen, and I wish I was dreaming it up, believe me. She therefore looked up on the internet to see what the underlying cause was for this may be, and was worried about this. She was keen for a medical review, and understandably concerned, it goes on to say as well. Interestingly enough, the consultant goes on to say in the report, prior to today's appointment, I had taken the opportunity to look up online the rare medical conditions that can cause eye colour change. What was noteworthy from research from May 1997 demonstrated 10 to 15% of white children can experience subtle changes to their eye colour after the age of 6 years old through to adulthood. Now bear in mind, my children at this time were 3 and 4 years old, so that doesn't concern them. This is something that is genetically determined and is certainly more commonly found in light or blue coloured eyes. He goes on to say that he suspects this may be the underlying basis of what I was perceiving as a dramatic change in eye colour of both my kids. And then he went on to say and conclude he was happy there was no underlying health concern causing this change. That didn't get me any answers, basically, because all it was saying was they didn't know what had caused this eye colour change. And also, they weren't over the age of 6, so I don't know why he thought that would somehow reassure me. Sorry, will we go on to that now?
Well, we can talk about it now because we have to qualify the conditions these photographs were taken in, because
Yeah.
it's not entirely fully obvious about the change in colour here, but this is the only evidence you got. The problem is that some of them were taken off screenshots,
Yeah.
and the screenshot colorimetry on a photograph can be quite different to what the human eye would see on the screen. It can be a lot bluer. So there's this blue shift, well, let's take it away. Let's do it.
Yeah, the top photograph, if I'd been able to show my children's faces, which obviously I'm not willing to do for their own safety, then it would have been a lot easier and obvious to see the change I'm talking about. However, the top photograph was taken prior.
Could you move that on? I think you're just looking at it on preview.
Oh, sorry. Right, let me see. Yeah, the top photograph is of my eldest daughter taken prior to the move in carers that I've referred to. The bottom one is what her eye colour is now. Now, the top one, she had extremely pretty eyes. They were green, they were blue, a greeny blue colour. And they are now more of a sort of a dark hazel. Will I move on to child S?
Yeah, just continue as you feel you would like to describe these.
Okay. The child in my youngest daughter is the most dramatic change, and I think anybody could see that in the top photograph, child S's eyes were blue, and her dad always used to say, "Oh, they're just like my brothers. He had blue eyes. She's got the same as my brothers." However, her eyes now are basically really dark. They're almost brown. They're very dark hazel, and as you can see from the photograph, the bottom photograph, that is child S now, and that was child S previously at the top.
But there's a couple of years difference there, is there? Or
There is, because the reason being for this is that a lot of the photographs that I had in my phone was hacked that many times that I ended up having 10 phones in a year.
Now you've actually had to go through. You've had a problem today about that, and you've had somebody. Which base has been accessing your?
Yeah, basically I took it to the O2 Guru. Well, I took it to an O2 shop I think I was on phone number 8 at this point, because they kept playing up, they kept phoning people of their own accord, sending messages that I hadn't written to people, causing me a lot of palaver actually. So I changed my phone thinking that would solve the issue. However, when I was on about phone number 8, took it to the O2 shop and said, "Look, this is ridiculous, I need this looked at." And the guy, an O2 Guru, plugged in my phone into his computer, said he was going to factory reset it, which I'd already done with several others. However, he was going to remove the photographs and he was going to factory reset. And as he was doing that, he said, "Oh, your phone's definitely hacked. It's just 2 attempts have been made right here and now to access it from Darlington." And I'd heard of Darlington. I've never been to Darlington. But when I looked it up, seemingly there is a secret base in Darlington. So whether that has something to do with
Where is Darlington exactly?
I think it's Gloucestershire, near there.
We'll look that up.
Yeah, I think. But it's an area I'm not familiar with. I've never been there. So he then put that in writing for myself, because the social work asked me why I had to keep changing my number so frequently. And instead of them saying, oh, it's all in your head, your phone's fine. He wrote down, I don't actually have that with me, unfortunately, but I could probably send you it, that there was a definite problem with my phone. My phone was corrupted, and he knew this because he had experienced and saw for himself that it had been attempted access from Darlington twice in the time that I was in the shop trying to get my factory reset done.
Well, that's your sort of data.
Yeah.
You've spoken on this now for between part 1 and 2 about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Where do you think this is going to lead you, and what's all this stuff about child trafficking and all that sort of stuff? I mean, this is really horrendous, and the stuff at school, and were children taken at this place where these so-called green crocodile people came, or what exactly happened with all that?
Well, the green crocodile people thing came from one of my best friend's daughters, who was around about 3 at the time, I think. This would have
And
been.
what age is she now?
She's 5 now, so she's in
Okay.
primary 1.
I would refer to this Kathy Morgan material that Kathy did a lot of work on, but okay, continue.
Yeah, I had never heard of Kathy Morgan, but you were telling me about her yesterday. But this little girl, let's call her Annie, had said to me that she said, oh, Alicia's different now. Child A is different now. And I said, oh, do you think so? And she said, yes. And I said to her, how is that? What do you think? And she said, well, big green dinosaurs, not crocodiles, big green dinosaurs came into the classroom, and it was scary. And she was relaying the story to myself and her mother. And she did look actually scared, relaying the story about these green dinosaurs that had come into the classroom.
How many?
She said there was 2, and she said they were really, really tall. She pointed really high up as she was, relaying the story, and she basically said that they took Alicia and Max and they went up, up, up into the sky, and it was a very strange.
So she took one of your daughters?
Well, that's what this little girl was saying.
And who was this guy, Max?
He's another pupil at the nursery. A little boy at the nursery. I don't know his mum, so I wasn't able. As I say, this is a 3-year-old that's telling me a story, but it struck a chord with me because she looked so scared as she was relaying the story. Her mum was also quite shocked at it, because she wasn't the type of little girl to kind of like babble on and have a really massive imagination. And it just seemed quite strange. We were both quite shocked by it, to be honest.
And did Child A ever refer back to this at any time? When were the children brought back?
She didn't say. The end of her story was that they'd been taken up, up, up by the dinosaurs. The teachers were scared. She said, we were hiding.
You didn't have access to see Child A at this time, obviously.
To see my friend's daughter.
Your friend's daughter, but she mentioned your Child A.
That's right, exactly.
Was in this craft or taken away in this thing up and up.
Yes. She said that, and I obviously wasn't able to verify it. Or
what date did this happen, and what's the location?
Well, the date that it happened would have been December 2016, and she said that because it was Christmas time. And that's when she came away with the thing about the dinosaurs, Annie, let's call her. And this was at the North 4th Street nursery, which is also a social work centre. There's a social work centre building here, and there's a nursery here. And they're both within yards of each other. And that's the nursery that my children were attending when they got removed from me. And it's the nursery I've referred to during this whole interview, to do with the women starving to death at the banana flats, to do with the little boy who had to cover his unfortunate dead mother up and wasn't found for 3 weeks in the house on his own. So that's the nursery I'm referring to. And there are rumours and yes, they're only rumours. However, with what's happened to my daughters, well, we don't actually know what's happened to my kids, that's the problem. But there are rumours that this nursery, and I know what this sounds like, and I know it's a serious allegation, but I'm putting it out there because I want other children to be saved, and I don't want this happening to anybody else, because it's horrendous. And seemingly there's a child trafficking ring that's been it's been going on surrounding this nursery for 40 years. And
So
it's a well-known...
that's a hell of a statement to make.
I know it is, Miles.
What evidence of any kind do you have for that statement?
The evidence I've got is basically is that I have been told from individuals who I trust, who I've known for a long, long time, they have heard rumours that there are a number of children being sold to childless, very rich people, and they're replacing the children with clones at this particular nursery. I'm not the only one who's running about saying this. People in Edinburgh will know what I'm talking about. At least a good few people will know exactly what I'm talking about. And I really want to put a stop to it, because I don't know, I've no evidence that it's true, but I've no evidence it's not true either. And given the differences in my children, and given the differences in other children at the nursery as well, who I don't want to name, and I don't want to even name in whether they're male or female, because I've been asked not to, I just want this out there so people are aware that potentially this could be something really serious. I want to know what's happened to my daughters, and I want to know why they've both simultaneously changed eye colour, ear shape, and why my oldest daughter's tongue tie has disappeared. And that's why I'm doing this.
Well, that's. You've done some further research. Do you want to mention the video that you mentioned before you went on air? That this thing. The whole point about bases is that it started about programmed generated life forms being made in a base in Berkshire, and clearly a link with underground facilities and some other kinds of reptilians. In fact, the witness there said reptilians. And you're talking about this happening near what some observers call a cloaked base, not too far away, possibly from where your things are happening.
Yeah.
And what was that you found on the internet?
What I found on YouTube was a video that's available to anybody to see, and I think the title of it is Sleeves, and it's a video showing a company in America who are obviously at some kind of conference centre selling their product, and what their product is what they're referring to is immortality. And what they're saying in this, anybody with the right amount of money can buy one right here, right now, online. Basically, they can take your consciousness. Could you remind me what it is they do again, Miles?
Well, BBC were running programmes from Open University on BBC Late Night Television with the usual bearded, tweed-jacketed professors talking about a British telecom programme called Project Soul Catcher.
Yeah.
Where tiny implants will be put into, nanobots will be put into your brain, record everything you've done. This is the late 1990s. And this thing you're talking about is exactly that project.
That's right. Yes, and they're not even being covert with it anymore. Whether they were in the...
With full-grown synthetic bodies.
Full-grown synthetic bodies that you can choose what hair colour you have, you can choose how big your biceps are, and they will transfer your consciousness into what they refer to as a new sleeve. And if anybody's interested in this, they can basically get in touch with this company, who I'm not going to name because of obviously for legal reasons, but maybe you could put a link to the video in this after this, and you can order yourself one. So basically you can order yourself a new body. I know how far out this sounds, but that's what this company are offering legally in America. You can buy this.
Okay, well, with that possible customer for such children, possibly it's an allegation. It's we don't know.
Yeah.
What you're saying. Finally, do you want to wrap things up? And thanks for coming here. This is a hell of a journey. It's your third attempt to get here.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to sort of say this February evening in 2019?
Yeah, what I would say is that this is to do with children, and this is the reason why I'm doing it. Adults and grown-ups are there to protect children, especially in a place like a nursery, especially social work care, when your children are removed from you for basically, as my lawyer said, he didn't understand it. However, I won't go into that now, but my basic wrapping up of this is children need to be protected. We need to look after them, and I don't feel that this is being done at this particular establishment or by the social work in Edinburgh. 24 hours missing out a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old's care plan. I mean, what is all that about? And the fact that they've changed after that 24-hour period, I didn't even know they'd been missing for 24 hours because I was only getting to see them so many times a week. And it's just horrendous, really. I mean, this is absolutely horrendous. And I just want people to be aware of it. And I want it to stop. And I want to know what's happened to my daughters.
Well,
And
I think
thanks very much
that's enough
for having me.
for now. Thank you very much for coming down and doing a witness statement for the Basis Project. This will go out on YouTube. Do you give me permission to do that?
Yeah, of course I do, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and thank you for the use of those images, which we're only showing the basic eyes.
Yeah.
Protect the children. Thank you very much from the Basis Project
Thank you.
for this
Thanks.
evening.